Meta Perspective Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Meta Perspective Podcast. We're your host, Alex.
Evan.
And the girl. This is the show where we talk about interesting and deep ideas that we all think about, but nobody really talks about. Also, if this is your first time joining, don't forget to jump in, like, subscribe. We do have random giveaways we do, so it never hurts to stay active with the channel.
Speaking of staying active, we do have the chat pulled up here, so anything you guys do say and add into the conversation we'll be able to respond to. And we want to hear your guys' perspective, because Meta Perspective Podcast is not meta
without your perspective.
Anyway, tonight's topic is going to be on the newly, I will say discovered, but the newly researched phenomenons around the pyramids, potentially having structures under them. This is a topic that has been all over the internet, and the implications of it, if it is actually true, might just be the greatest discovery, like the greatest archaeological discovery in human history.
By far.
But, we looked into this topic a little bit. There's a lot of clickbait type of stuff around this where, it's one study, and we're going to go into how that was kind of done. And, it's really an interpretation of the data that has come to this conclusion. Whether it's true or not, only time will tell, but there's a lot more to dive into in order to truly verify the findings that, have been published. So I guess I'll start just by kind of laying out the foundation of what actually has been proposed. So basically, I guess two scientists, I'll have to look up their name because they're foreign and I can't remember them. It's Corrado Malenga from the Italy's University of Pisa, and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. So basically, they are using a method. It's referred to as SAR. It's some kind of.
Is it like LiDAR?
Yeah, it's a satellite version. Let's see. The actual name of it is synthetic aperture radar, and it's used. It uses a satellite, and what they do is they look at, and this is kind of the weird part about it. I don't really know enough about this stuff to fully understand how it works, but essentially looking at seismic activity from a satellite and vibrations on the Earth, they can determine voids in underground, and they can kind of predict, and you take data from the satellite and you can kind of construct these models, which there's probably some legitimacy to the technique. Whether it can actually predict thousands of meters under the Earth or not, that's kind of up for debate. But they have done studies where they kind of do like a calibration study where they've used the same technology on known underground structures, and it maps out pretty well. But a lot of skeptics say that this technology, you can only really, it's not penetrating the Earth. It's kind of looking at the surface, and based on that, they're trying to predict what's under the Earth, which is kind of, how accurate can that really be? So that kind of sets the stage for it. But essentially, if you want to pull up the image, here it is. So they're proposing that there are structures within the pyramids that are identified. That's kind of like the little house-looking things in beige. And then they are also saying that there are these columns that are under the pyramid itself, hollow columns, potentially with spiral-like staircase structures going down in them, indicating that it could be a man-made type of thing. And then below those columns, there is, I guess, cube-like structures, either hollow or somehow, somehow they've been able to identify something of this nature. And actually, the other image behind here shows the actual wave interpretations. If you could find that, it's one of the 3 images that's up. You might just have to go to the taskbar. Yeah, you could minimize that, or it's probably going to be okay. So this is basically the raw data. So in the bottom you see the columns, and above that, the image to the right and the left. Those are basically the cube-like structures. So yeah, that's kind of what they're working with. So I guess just to kind of set the stage for, whether this is true or not. Obviously, this is just one study. This would need to be verified by other studies or other scientists, third parties that maybe have a knowledge of the methodology but don't follow the exact same, interpretation, let's say. And, some of I actually watched an explanation of this earlier today, and the peculiar thing, there's a couple things that don't just quite add up right. There's been kind of vibrational scans of the pyramids that have been done in the past. So there are, we have verified that there are tunnels in the pyramids themselves because people can go there. And they didn't necessarily show up in the scans of this particular, whatever was done recently. Which is kind of, like you want to have some congruency there. You want to say, okay, this is the known channel that we know, and this showed up as well as these new things that we've identified. So there's some skeptics out there that, this should be able to.
Basically, it's new raw data, and this is how it's been interpreted. And as it gets verified, more is coming out. And what I'm hoping is this actually sends some independent people with other equipment, other means of testing who have the clearance and are able to do it. That's one of my biggest problems with the pyramids is that there's a lot discovered that isn't disclosed, really. It's like there's chambers underneath the Sphinx. We know this, but like, there's no pictures. It's not talked about. It's one of those things where, for me, that's what creates the conspiracy and the skepticism is like, it's this narrative, like realistically of all these different people who maybe grew up obsessed with the pyramids. They spent their life dedicated to getting the truth and figuring this out, or just trying to understand it better. And as they got older and started to learn this stuff, they're like, hey, this is crazy. There's actually tunnels and labyrinths and stuff underneath the Sphinx even that connect to the pyramids. And there's these things. But for some reason, while this is something taught to us in history classes, a lot of these areas of the pyramid are never talked about. And to me, to me, at least, I know it's all perspective, but to me, like, that's the most interesting parts of it. Is like the Sphinx, we all grew up thinking was just a statue, but there's stuff under it. So it's like the top of something grand.
Yeah.
So what's under it? If there's something underneath something that spectacular, what's underneath? And like, it's just an empty room. You're like, that's all you know? That's all you got? Like, what was it for? They're like, I don't know. It could have been anything. Yeah. It's like, where's the obsession over these places we've never heard of that are there?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think creates the conspiracy, the obsession of conspiracy around this is we were all taught as kids that the Sphinx was just a statue and the pyramids were just a burial resting site, basically.
Yeah.
And as we get older, it's like there's all these other chambers, things that go underground and all this stuff. And they're like, we don't know how they built the pyramids and the time frame they built them. We don't really know what tools they used. Everything's so precise. Their math was spot on. There's all these little things. The stones weren't even in the same area. And then it's like, there's also chambers underneath the statue. What is that? Nothing. You're like, okay, if you tell me that LiDAR's picking stuff up underneath, that's the interesting part to me is that split dynamic of one side goes all in and says this is part of the answers to what this thing was actually for, while the other side is like disregard all of this stuff unless it's 100% factual.
Yeah.
But to me, that's what creates the issue of the skepticism on both sides is if it could be logical, we have to factor in everything else we know about it, but you're not sharing everything we know. So how can we all say like their LiDAR is you know, it's misinformation. I don't hear it as much anymore. I'm forgetting it finally. Yeah. But it's like it's misinformation, it's this and that. It's like, but I had to do my own independent research to find out about some of these other tunnels and stuff that are factual, but not talked about. Like, this should be breaking stuff. It's like, hey, we just found out that, you know, the cavemen created water first. You're like, that's huge. That's like, how do you create water? Like, and they're just like, yeah, but we're focused on the fire. You're like, that's great. I can see the fire. I see the pyramid. I see the Sphinx, but I want to know about all the intricacies. Not like the crazy specifics, but like there's entire chambers underneath the ground there. That's mind blowing.
Yeah. So actually, this is something that I didn't necessarily know before this whole kind of new thing came out, and I started looking into it. But there are actual natural caverns and stuff under the pyramids, and this is all like a limestone bedrock. So like limestone's pretty erodible by water. It happens over time, and it's very likely that there are natural caverns. And I mean, I guess not very likely that there are. And actually, one of the things that I found while looking into this, so there was something that was discovered, I think in the 1800s at some point, either 1840 or 1870. I can't remember where, but so these, like. It's all British guys that like go and find this stuff. It's like kind of very like mummy movie kind of vibe. But so there's this thing called the Tomb of the Birds that was discovered. It's not where the pyramids are, but it's however far from the pyramids, and it's this entrance into a cave system that supposedly leads under this pyramid or one of the three pyramids, and it's called the Temple of the Birds or Tomb of the Birds, is because whenever they excavated it and first went in there, they found a bunch of mummified birds, and you can see video of these kind of chambers or whatever where the birds used to be, their little cutout areas. So, I mean, obviously the ancient Egyptians knew that there were caves under the pyramids even before they were built, probably.
So is that like carbon dioxide, these mummified birds, is just the gases? Or is this like mummified as in they're mummifying them?
Yeah, they
like
actually...
wrapping them up?
Yeah, they actually mummified them.
That's strange.
Yeah. So, I mean... So,
they're like canary in the coal mine with like a purpose. They're like, you served your time well. Wrap him up, leave him in it. He stays under the pyramid.
Yeah.
With the pharaoh. He did his time.
Yeah, I mean, it's trippy stuff. Like, like, I guess for the purposes of this discussion, we'll introduce some skepticism early on here, and then maybe assume that it's real and talk about kind of the trippier, deeper stuff. But one of the things that I found peculiar was, I mean, if there's claims that these things are man-made, these columns. But the thing that stuck out to me was that, someone was talking about the water table, and it's close to the Nile River, even though it's desert. That's a pretty big river. It's very saturated, and the water table would have been, within 30 meters from the surface, even, as far back as when the river existed. So if these were man-made, I don't know how they're digging, deep down into these caverns. They can't be doing it underwater. But I mean, anything's possible, I guess. I'm not naysaying for that reason, but that's kind of, if you think about in your head, like, these giant columns going deep underground, you think about this giant empty area, but it's underwater. It's filled with water. So
with them talking about 600 meters, if we're playing skeptics to start off, like, it's not possible. It's unrealistic, and there's no reason to look into this. If you're looking at it from that perspective, that's the reality. You're saying that you have at least eight different pillars that are crazy wide that go down 600 meters on average each. That's not possible for that time. That'd be hard for us to do now.
Yeah.
For the size, it's one thing to drill a hole. It's another when it's so wide, you can't use a drill bit. You have to find a way to carve that out going all the way down for 600 meters. That's so freaking far. It makes no sense. So if we're playing the skeptic side, looking at the data that they're projecting, you would say this is completely 100% unrealistic, and it's not something to investigate. What brings it to life for me is the fact that there is no, settled upon reason or settled upon way of how the pyramids were built.
Yeah.
So if one of the biggest mysteries of ancient civilizations and ancient structures is the pyramids, and how in 20 to 30 years did they get over 2 million stones perfectly cut, moved from a place miles away? How were they able to do that in that time frame?
That was something that I hadn't thought about. When you brought that up to me earlier, I had to look it up and I had to do the math on it. But essentially, to do one pyramid in 30 years, you'd essentially have to lay 300 2.5-ton stones every day. So, think about maybe like a 12-hour work day or something like that. Like, I don't know what that equals out to exactly, 300 divided by 12. But you're essentially laying like, 30 stones an hour or something like that. And
40?
Yeah, what is that? Let me do so 300 stones, 12 hours. Yeah, 25 stones an hour, essentially. I mean, if you have a bunch of teams
confident with that 40
doing that, I guess that's feasible, but that's very fast. I mean, it seems like to do something like of that magnitude, it would be done slow, and I would think it would take 70 or 80 years to do
Plus,
that.
then you factor in the preciseness, as if it was done slowly. It's meticulous.
Yeah.
Which also raises the suspicions of how can you be that meticulous, especially if the narrative is a bunch of slaves and animals pulling these rocks and doing this stuff. Who are the people who are so dedicated to perfectly do this? And if that's not the case, if it's some kind of machinery, what's the machinery? What are you using to cut these stones that quick and that precise? And that most importantly, it's consistent. So it's you would almost say it's one person doing the same job, but if it's multiple people doing all of this, then they all have the exact same schematics and they all nail it perfectly every time. For how far these stones were that they got them, along with the time frame and how precise and meticulous everything was, that raises questions for, like, one, what is this? Because now everybody's arguing like, hey, none of this was just for a burial site. Like, a lot of the skeptics for like the original theory are saying like this thing, the original structure is way older than that.
Yeah.
And the pharaohs and stuff, all the burial shit that we were taught in school was just the Egyptians who took over that area after. They were the ones who found it and were like, this is ours, this is our stuff. And they glorified gold. Maybe they found riches. I don't know what was there. All I know is they were really popular. And in 20, 30 years, they did things nobody else could do. They were just magic people.
Yeah.
And even in the Bible, you know, the whole thing is like Jesus going there and like ideas of these people knowing magic and all of this stuff. Like it is kind of throughout history, it's always been kind of a mystical place.
Right. So, you know, I've got a decent amount of knowledge about like the ancient world. Very big fan of like the Mesopotamian era, like anywhere from 6,000 to 2000 BC. You know, that there was a lot of, you know, human advancements and civilization was at pretty much its highest point. Then it kind of died off before it got back to where it was before. But, you know, the stuff that these people were able to do is pretty amazing. And one of the things that's interesting, so you have, you know, Mesopotamia is kind of that area of like Iraq and around like Saudi Arabia and all that. That was kind of the fertile ground. But then you also have, you know, the Nile and where the Egyptians were. It's very similar, you know, agrarian habit or ecosystem.
Speaking of which, isn't there a whole nother conspiracy about Iraq and how there was they actually had some kind of like ancient area there that had been somewhat recently discovered in the two like what is it like basically the conspiracy theory is that 9/11 the whole thing with Iraq was justifying going there to occupy to take control over a certain ancient area.
Well, I mean, that's, you know, the country that is Iraq, it's basically, it was mostly the Elamites, Elam. But, I mean, that's essentially where you have Babylon. It is, you know, southeast of, you know, like modern day Iraq. I don't know exactly if it was within that area or not, but that's
like government treasure hunters.
You basically have, yeah, like that's, you know, that's the Babylonians. Later you have the Elamites, and the Assyrians, and it's like it's a very occupied area in human history, and it, you know, it always changes out. These people come and go and conquer and die and salt the earth, and then a few hundred years they come back. You know, it's like it's changed hands a lot, but this is kind of the cradle of civilization. But the trippy thing is that the Egyptian area, like that area around the Nile, very similar to Mesopotamia, and like the Egyptians have kind of always been there. Like even when there was Babylon and all that stuff going on in Mesopotamia, there were still people in the Nile area, kind of separated by, you know, some distance and some desert and all that. But it's interesting to think, like, you know, like the Sphinx. The Sphinx is older than all the pyramids. I don't know exactly how old it is. Maybe it's like 6,000 years old or something like that, or older. What?
We got the case down here.
Oh, did you bring it?
Fumble.
All right, here, I'll get
I thought it was brought. It was not brought.
next. You had to get the case. Finish that one. But yeah, so the Egyptians have kind of always been there. So, you know, like, I don't know enough about, you know, prehistory to say that, you know, when we can pinpoint that when that area was first occupied, but it's pretty much always been Egyptian. And yeah, I mean the crazy thing, it's like you have like the Romans came through and like conquered a lot of Egypt and like took a bunch of stuff back with them. Actually, the oldest stuff in Rome is from Egypt. And it's kind of crazy, like in the center of their palazzos and all that, they're like these ancient Egyptian obelisks that are like, you know, 4,000 to 6,000 years old or so. And, you know, the Catholic Church just slapped like an angel on top.
Well, that's one of the big arguments too, is that Rome never really fell, that it just became Catholicism.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is kind of true.
That all of the stuff within Rome, all of this ancient stuff they got from Egypt, all of this ancient knowledge, all of the money, all the gold, basically their downfall was simultaneously, probably not related, but simultaneously the Catholic Church took it over. So while the government fell, the church, the Catholic Church took over.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole thing with like the Vatican and all this is it's like everybody knows it is public knowledge. They have their basement, they have like their vault that has all their treasures, and they don't disclose the treasures.
Right.
So the question is, okay, obviously you're not going to be like, hey, we have $7 trillion here. But at the same time, if you did, that would raise concerns. Why do you have this kind of wealth hidden in one area? Like that's really selfish for especially a church.
Well, I guess that's.
But at the same time, you would say, if you're not disclosing this stuff, it also makes us wonder what you have.
Yeah.
And it's always rubbed me the wrong way that like nobody has ever talked about that.
Yeah.
Like that it's common knowledge, but it's not like common knowledge. Like Rome fell and the Catholic Church got stronger and took over. Like the Catholic Church is essentially Rome.
Right.
Like, killed Jesus. Like, that fucking.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is like, like these areas have been conquered so many times that like, I mean, even take like the pyramids themselves. It's like you've had grave robbers and stuff like that. Like where stuff is missing, and like the whole Library of Alexandria, supposedly burned down and all that stuff. All these like ancient sites where they had all this knowledge either disappeared, got destroyed, or you don't really know what happened to it. So, the records that we have, like pretty much, if you go back several thousand years to like BC plus, anything metal, anything wood, anything organic is pretty much not around. It's going to dissolve. It's going to dissociate. But the reason why we have so much information is because like the cuneiform tablets, like clay is clay. It'll stay if you fire it and all that. That's going to last. So we've deduced all this stuff from hieroglyphs and cuneiform tablets and all that, and like there's really no way to verify something. If a piece is missing, you just kind of fill in the gap and assume. And I think that's what bothers a lot of people now is that, now we have modern technology, the internet, and actually there's a lot of information that other countries have. Like, to give an example, like the movie 300, the Battle of Thermopylae, the Western world always assumed that was just a story. Because the Greek writer who kind of pioneered that story and told everybody and came up with it was very theatrical. He would kind of embellish a lot, but it was all like, he would go from town to town telling these stories, these magnificent stories of this giant battle, and he would make some flair. So we always thought it was just bullshit. But then now in modern society, looking at like the Persian records being translated, and now that we have the ability to communicate with their historians and their ancient past and like collaborate, we actually verify that it was true. So like that kind of stuff is happening all the time where we're finally starting to put all the pieces together, and like we can look at this stuff where even 50 years ago, before the internet was a thing, you couldn't really. You'd have to go visit Cairo and like read books in the library. It's like now this stuff is all digital, and we can kind of, combine our knowledge.
And that also creates the problems too. When you have like the fact checkers, like doing my own research just on this topic in itself, there's a lot of stuff that's like just debunking it, being like, it's a hoax, it's all fake, it's this. And that's the thing is, to me, it's almost like defamatory to say hoax. Hoax implies that I did this with the intentions of getting the stir. It implies I knew this was fake and I did it for the attention. It's a hoax. I made a fake Bigfoot. I knew it was fake, and I did it to get the reaction of a real one, a hoax, almost like a prank. And I don't think any aspect of this was done to be a prank. The words they used, the defamatory language they used in regards to the situation.
This recent thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all over the internet. Like, it's like all these different things are like, hey, it's fake, blah, blah, blah. And my whole thing is like, none of the things I looked at gave legitimate reasons why they were fake. It's kind of like you said. It's like, well, if you compare it with this and that, it's not possible. It's like, this is technology, though. You can't argue with your logic. You have to argue with technology. That's what it's saying. If technology says that this star is orbited by this, it doesn't matter what you think or how you feel. You have to use science to disprove that that star isn't orbited. If I use science to figure out that I think it is, that's the reality. You can't say like E equals MC squared. Yeah, but that's not how I see it. You're like, you son of a bitch. Like, that's, it's like this is trying to explain something outside of what we can see.
Yeah.
So you can't just say, well, we know this and we know that, so it can't work. We've had situations like that, and things can work in impossible situations. Well, it depends on. It depends. I mean, for all we know, there's a grid that goes around it that they did first to keep the water out for enough time for them to do it.
Right. I mean,
but that's my whole thing.
Theoretically, okay, let's just go into the part where we assume that it is real, and talk about the purpose and all that.
I'm down.
I mean, okay, so
I do want to say though.
Okay, sorry.
What bothers me with the whole skeptics thing, is how quick I see the stuff. So this just got out there, which means it's going to take a while to really be verified and people to follow up on these theories and kind of investigate them. But even quicker than that are tons of media outlets saying that it's not possible. And that's more of my issue, is people who sit in front of a computer all day know more about the technology and these new findings than people, who haven't had a chance to actually go and validate the stuff. Yeah. That's more my issue. And that's where you see a lot of, things from the past too, where it's like, oh, this can't be that. And you're like, okay, that's disproven. It is. So at what point can you, I mean, very simply put, I'd hate to do this. This isn't like a political stance, but the Hunter Biden laptop, you go online, search it. It's verifiably false. It's untrue. And all of their stuff is like, with the FBI was like, no, it's not. We had other groups, lawyers, everyone looked at it and says it's not. This is all fake. This is all disinformation. And it's partly from Russia as well. That was the heart of what I saw when I looked up the laptop. Yeah. Then it comes out that it was true. The FBI knew it was true. There's leaks from the FBI to these media outlets that with direct connection saying telling them, literally pushing them to say, this is false narrative. Do not accept this as truth. So you get to a point where it's like, you told me this fucking dude's kid's laptop was fake. Who do I believe about giant pillars under the pyramid? It's like, you got to show me some fucking science to be like, this isn't real, and here's why. Well, we used our LiDAR. We did not get the same results. False. I'll believe that. But where is anything verifiable? Yeah. There is so much stuff saying it's fake out there.
Well,
I'm just looking for something verifiable.
You mentioned something just a little bit ago where you said that there's kind of two groups of people. That there's the people that will buy anything that they're told and are like they want to believe the aliens built the pyramid, and then there's the people that are like the hardcore traditional archaeologists that are like, no, it was a tomb.
It was a stone and hammer.
But it's like, you have people, Randall Carlson.
Ox.
If you know,
Randall Carlson, yeah.
You know about him. He's kind of like a Santa Claus looking dude.
Yeah.
Seems like a super cool guy, but he's been kind of challenging the traditional consensus of these anthropologists and all that. And he's kind of one of the guys that pioneers the Great Flood theory. We're actually right in our backyard, Cahokia Mounds. We always just assumed that place was a burial site. Well, that's because we found buried bodies there. But now that they're looking into it, now that we have updates to like our carbon detection and all that, it's like these things were built before these bodies were even alive. So it's like these Native Americans found these giant earth structures
After the bodies were
and
dead.
decided to bury their people there because it was so crazy.
Oh,
So it's like,
Yeah.
we find that, 50 or 100 years ago, we assume it's a burial site. We assume that it's similar to the pyramids, same kind of idea. But it's like, okay, you do some digging, and it's like those people didn't know what it was either. And this guy, Randall Carlson, is basically saying that after the Great Flood, these Clovis people of Native America, of America, like these Native Americans before the Native Americans that we understand, it's like these ancient Americans basically built this structure in case it flooded, they could all go up on top, or it's like, or it serves as a lookout point.
I think I saw that same one.
And like same thing with these river valleys, these giant river valleys that we just assume, like geologists have just assumed that the river has eroded over time, just kind of crossing these boundaries and slowly eroding this large area. And now it's at the very bottom. But Randall Carlson's saying that no, this is a giant flood that came through and leveled all this stuff, dug out this giant channel, and now the river is there because that's the lowest point. So, we're challenging the ancient, or not the ancient, but the traditional archaeologist perspective all the time. But something like this, though, it's kind of like,
This challenges human perspective entirely.
Yeah.
Like blanket statement. Like, you could be like, the Earth's flat and aliens made us. You'd be like, so there's these pillars that go down into the Earth. They'd be like, okay, that throws me off a little bit. Like,
So,
the
okay.
craziest skeptics will have trouble comprehending this.
Yeah.
Because even our greatest feats today, I mean, you even look at something like Crazy Horse, the monument Crazy Horse. It's such a phenomenal structure. And it's not done, but a good chunk of it was done and scoped out by one guy who did work on Mount Rushmore. But this one guy got a good scaling of it and had a good plan and started to do this himself. Had kids and had his kids join him. Took the government out, and it's just been a small knit group with, like, I think Canada or something. But it's like, for real. But it's like a small knit group that really works on this to test the rock and figure out how to do this properly. It's still not done.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's been a long time, and we have not carved a guy and a horse on a rock yet. So to think that, like, in 20 to 30 years, you could build a pyramid that just completely trumps that. You're basically building a mountain,
Yeah.
not carving one. You're building a fucking mountain.
Yeah, you're digging a mountain up.
In perfect scale.
moving it.
Yeah, you're digging up a mountain just to build it. You're literally going into the earth to put it up. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like, we're going to take what's down and make it up. It's crazy to me. And then on top of that, the timing, all this stuff, I mean, it literally reframes how we view reality.
Yeah.
Because if people are able to achieve this type of stuff, and you're saying it's slaves and stuff like that are doing this, it's like, it's hard to accomplish something that precise and that perfect with that kind of timing with just slaves. You're telling me all these slaves you had were just like, we don't want to get whipped, and so we're just going to work extra hard. Like, that's not realistic. And it's like,
I mean,
morale dies. You cannot maintain that consistency for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
Impossible. It doesn't make sense.
I mean,
so
I
to
think-
say there's pillars that go down and there's structures that are created down at the end of these pillars, it definitely is an impossible statement to make.
Yeah.
But again, when you see media saying that it's a hoax and all this stuff. I need LiDAR. I need I need something to do this. Like, the technology is not that hard. You're a whole media outlet. Rent the stuff and be the only news source in the world to just rent some technology and debunk it.
Yeah.
Or you ran the same studies and found the same thing. Now you can be part of the conspiracy. And either way, you're getting magnitude. But to just say it's false based on just what we know, but this is a new discovery using new technology. Yeah, but based on what we know, that can't be. But we don't really know anything. We don't really know anything. Yeah. So all of these hoaxes, all these things saying it's false, I just, again, take it with a grain of salt and, like, keep your mind open.
Well, if you ask me, like, just using my engineering brain, if this, they're saying that these are man-made or constructed structures. Being under the water table, a couple things come to mind. If this was man-made, if this is all true and this is for real, then there's one way that it could be done in my mind. So you know how they talk about the cube-like structures at the bottom, right? So if we can we pull up the cube-like structures?
First one.
So that's the raw data, and it could just be noise, but the fact that it's columns tells you something. It's one of the images on there, but okay. So either way, okay. So think about the cubes, right? So we already know that there's natural caves under the pyramids. Let's assume that those cubes are essentially those caves. I think that's what they would find is these giant cavernous voids,
aka aquifers.
Right, and you can have a confined or an unconfined aquifer. So in certain scenarios, you have actual, the bedrock is solid where you have like a hole or a pocket that's not recharged by groundwater. It just is what it is. So essentially, the only way that you could do this, in my mind, is if the cubes were cavernous, areas, and you either, essentially, you'd have to drain the water that would make one of these columns into the cube. And the way that you could potentially do that is with some type of chemical reaction that would erode the limestone, just going straight down. Like, you're not sending guys down with shovels and shit to dig down into these giant caverns. You'd basically be draining the water somehow and eroding the limestone somehow. And like, you could do this, several different ways. You could do this several different times, maybe all at once. But essentially, that's the only way I could see it being done, is if this was, the reason why they're straight up, if this is true and if this data is correct, then, you'd have to do it by some other means than labor. This is science at work, or engineering feats. So you either collapse, you'd maybe collapse the bottom of it. If you had access to the caverns of the caves, maybe those are unconfined space where the above water table is not like the cubes. Let's say you discovered a cavern that was able, you could excavate down to this cavern where the cube is at, and it's all empty. There's no water in there because it's confined. And then you were able to collapse the water above it, causing the water to drain in this column formation, possibly with the use of something in the surface, like a chemical, like some type of salt or corrosive, something or other that would eat away at the limestone in a certain way, where you are basically draining water through this thing at high velocity. You're adding chemical solvent so to erode the thing, and it's just going to this unconfined aquifer cube and then essentially just going lower and seeping into the earth. That's the only way that I could see it being possible.
Well, my only thing too is they talk about these structures and none of it's investigated. So it's like we have 5 things and they all go down these pillars, and we believe there are these corridors that go all the way down with staircases. Okay, well then there's that hidden library. It's down there. That's where all the information of the entire human history is down there. If that's not what it is, then I would argue more so that those things are that far down into the earth specifically to harness energy. And it would be like the earth's energy. If we're going off of like harnessing the earth's energy, we don't understand that technology yet. We're not there.
Yeah.
Making that statement, for me to say that, is a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you're saying like, oh, it's harnessing the earth's technology. We don't know that that's possible. But when you see a giant pyramid, a really specific shape, that's weird. It's not attractive. You don't see one giant pyramid and go, that really sets the landscape. People walk up and be like, this place, they're going to walk up and be like, what the fuck is that giant ominous structure? It does have an ominous. It has some kind of like utility feel to it. It doesn't feel, it feels machine.
Yeah.
You know, if anything humans make has some kind of art to it, but just a perfect pyramid, to me, it just seems weird that it's like, yeah, well, obviously, like our best fucking king died, or he's gonna die, so he wants us to build a giant pyramid to put him in. It's like, okay, well, why did they do that in all these other areas of the world? Because they also, you know, who doesn't want to be buried in a pyramid? You'd understand if you were a rich king. A pyramid's the way to go. It's like, it doesn't make sense. It's like, it looks more like this thing is an ominous like structure, a utility thing. And if there was a time that we weren't brought up just being taught 1 + 2s, and maybe more of an understanding of the inner workings of the spiritual with humans and nature. And for example, like, humor me for a moment, you know, we're all created of this earth. So are trees. So is everything on this earth. And it all works perfectly together, to the point where we have consciousness and can use the other things to either feed us or give or use it to create things. So the fact that we're able to use this earth in such a deliberate and mathematical way seems crazy, that you couldn't get energy using that same structure. You know, we've obviously figured out how to create life and clones and stuff like that by looking at the structure of life. So why couldn't we do the same thing with energy? If we understand that, like, so much energy is produced by the earth and by tectonic plates and all this stuff, and this energy is like, you know, tectonic plate slides, and that's energy for a whole country for 10 years. Like, it's crazy. Like, stuff like that. You know,
yeah.
That's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. It's like, but if you were to harness the earth's energy and try to create an energy supply as an ancient civilization, you would use what you know, which is you. Like, this is how I work. This is how this works. All right, let's... And again, you look at all these different things, all these different structures all throughout time. They all have cave drawings, all this stuff. They all have markings, and all of them kind of have this weird mimicry of the human body. All of them do. You know, you see these weird things and the way they're shaped and all this stuff is like, those are fucking fallopian tubes. Very clearly. And the drawing next to it's fucking balls and a dick.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't hard to figure out. It's very obvious. This is the thing about life, but how do they understand what this stuff looks like? Well, cutting people open. Okay, now let's get to the stars. We don't know how they were that good with the stars and all the technology. There's just all these questions we don't know. So that's my big thing with the pyramids. It's like, you can't have vast understanding of things that you should not understand, while simultaneously having technology that we don't understand, and it all kind of coexists in a very natural way of the earth. Our shit's the only stuff that's not natural, because we're the ones who are like, we're we're going to create technology taking atoms and slamming them together. That's not natural.
Yeah.
What did you have to do that? Well, we had to create new elements to create certain metals that could withstand the heat to be able. That's not natural. You don't see that throughout history. What you see is the earth being used with the earth. And that's why we believe that ancient technologies are they're archaic. It's the best you got is a metal shovel. That's the best you could ever create. And that wasn't until here. What about this discovery of a metal plow? 1,000 years before that.
Yeah.
It's not credible. There's just so many things where the timelines of our human history are kind of starting to erode.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, pyramids were built in 20 to 30 years. That doesn't make sense and has never made sense, but no credible person will say that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Well, discredited people who are crazy are the ones talking about like, hey, we're using different stuff and we're releasing stuff, and the other more powerful people with more money who have been on these properties for a long time don't say that's not true. We did that.
Yeah.
They just say that's not true
Well,
because of what we found.
That's kind of like,
It's misdirect.
one of the mysteries to me is that, people claim that we don't know how the pyramids were built. But it's like, okay, well, you have a 30-year period and there are multiple pyramids. So it's like you have these time periods where, yeah, you're right. It's not just, slaves that can't read and can't do and think for themselves. I mean, those might be the people doing the labor, but you have to have like foremen or engineers or something that are approving, these blocks being put in place. And there can't just be one guy. It's not just one dude. It's like, there's shared knowledge, or there would have to be. And over that 30-year time period, you're telling me that there's no record from all these people that were overseeing this work was done correctly, that they didn't write anything down, and there's no record of how they did this stuff.
How to do it.
Yeah, how
this
to do it.
This is what
from
you need
all
to do.
These people over
and
all
none
this
of
time.
them learned it and said, I want to write this down because this is cool. They were just like, I'll just do it. Oh, he killed me before I could write it down. It was 20, 30 years. None of you could record what you were doing or why you were doing.
And there would have to be something like, you couldn't just, I mean, I guess you could just explain it to somebody, but there would have to be something written down where like, oh, you're a new engineer on the job. Here's the tablet. This is how we do things. Just follow these directions and we'll help you out. Like there had to be some type of instructions or something that were reproducible and shareable so we could coordinate all this work. Like to just say it's verbal and they wouldn't keep any record of how these stones were set in place, or like, that
They were just very record-keeping
as you're working,
people.
Okay, it's like, oh, we did this many stones today, blah, blah, blah.
They were a very record-keeping people.
Right.
It doesn't make sense that you could do all of that. And the only records we have from them are like, these pyramids we use for our tombs. What about the construction of them? Like, we know what you have written down for what you're using them for. You might have a few drawings of people pulling blocks and stuff, but a lot of that is like, how do I know? I mean, we've seen how much has been taken away.
Yeah.
So how do we know that those weren't different stones? How do we know that those weren't lighter stones?
Yeah.
That they encased it in? That they found these pyramids and they didn't understand what they were, kind of like the Mayans, or kind of like not the Mayans, maybe the Mayans, but kind of like with our backyard.
Native Americans. You talking about the Cahokia Mounds?
Thank you. But kind of like that. It's like, who says like you did this?
Yeah.
It's like, how do we, all your writings are what you did with it, not how you did it.
Right.
And that's the thing, is there's all these stones missing. Well, how do I know that you didn't come across this and then just rebrand it? You recased it with like a lighter limestone. You did all this stuff, blah, blah, made it look real pretty. Because wasn't that
and that took 30 years.
Because wasn't that the original thing was like, well, it used to be encased in limestone. It was white with a gold tip. Wasn't like, that's like what's sold to people.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if that's just what the Egyptians did with a lighter stone.
Right.
Like, yeah, there was a casing around it. They talk about that, but they don't talk about how they built the pyramid. There's just some writings on like an encasement, and then that's gone. But the actual pyramid itself is like, people have struggled to get into it.
Yeah.
Like, so what is this thing that was there before them that even afterwards, even after the Egyptians were gone, people were like, it's hard getting into this thing. Like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
We got all the limestone and shit. They did off easily, but we can't strip the rest of it.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's too well constructed. It's too heavy. We gave up once we got the good stone. The heavy stuff, fuck that. Like, yeah, it takes like this many guys to move this stone. We need 10 times that for one for this.
Yeah.
Like, that's not worth our time or our labor, and we don't know what we're going to do with that heavy of a stone when we get it. We're going to chop these down. Or they break them. I'm just saying, you don't go to the pyramid now and just break some stones and take those giant, large chunks and carry them. Like, limestone you could do that with, but not the stone it's made of. And it's just, it's those kind of things where it's just like, it makes you wonder, like, what was the pyramids? You know, when you see the Sphinx and it's a giant lion with a small man head, and they're like, well, technically, if it was thousands of years older, technically it would have been the age of the Leo, which is the age of the lion, which all of these ancient people were real big in the stars. But let's not factor in how obsessed with the stars all these people were, and the fact that there was a lion that has water damage, which would have been done around the time of the year the Leo, and the fact that the face looks like it's touched up during the time of the Egyptians.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's just hard to believe that this is just the way it was. It looks like a less developed nation that was just cocky. A bunch of fuckboys were like, hey, I found a bunch of gold in here. Hey, we're going to fucking be kings, bro. And they just like became Egypt. You know, and it's like, it's just hard to believe that they just did all of this stuff and then just disappeared that quick. You can't have that kind of power to build stuff like that and then also not, I don't know, not last.
Well, I think there's a sci-fi explanation for all this that if you could just entertain the idea. I mean, I think maybe I'm not the one to come up with this necessarily, but this would make sense to me in a sci-fi realm of our Earth. So I'll first start by saying that if time travel exists, it's already happened. So let's say that some distance into the future, humankind advances to a point where we are able to create a way to go back in time. Or potentially even like an alien creator kind of thing that seeded our genetics in the first place has already been here. But either way, you know, are you going to go?
Music. I'm sorry.
All right.
I was like,
Oh, well, I'll lay out my foundation here. So, okay. So assuming that time travel exists, it's already happened. Meaning that if people ever go back in time, for as long as humans exist, it's already happened, because we're not going to wake up one day and things are going to be different because someone went back in time 1,000 years from now. They've already gone back in time, and it would create a loop essentially. So, you know, what I think happened in the sci-fi realm that I'm laying out is at some point in the future we figure out time travel, and we send people back, and we send people back because we recognized the things that were left in the past were to direct people that are going back into time. So you take things like the pyramids and these hieroglyphs and all this stuff, and you know there's a reason why all of these cultures, whether it's Egypt, you know, the Aztecs, you know, people in the Middle East and Asia and all that, they believed that their ruler was their god. So if you were a time traveler and you were sent back and you gave these people all this knowledge, they would look at you like a god, because essentially that's what you are. You're coming down from the stars. You're giving them infinite knowledge and improving their lives, and they're going to worship you because of that. And then once they leave or once they die, then the next ruler is seen now as divine. And that's how the tradition started. But then, like at some point in the future, around the time that we figure out time travel, we're finding these breadcrumbs that have been left by the people that were already sent back that hasn't happened yet. And we realize that, oh, this means we already sent someone back. Well, we got to figure this out. We got to send someone back. Here are the coordinates. They're written into this fucking stone tablet. We're going to send someone there. And with all the knowledge that we have of the ancient world and our current technology, we're going to send someone back there at that time period, at that location, with the ability to build the pyramids, or with the ability to erode a column of limestone with acid, or the ability to cut these stones and melt stone and all this stuff. It's like, we have the technology. We got to send someone back because we know we already did. So we got to complete the loop. Because if we don't, then we're not getting here. And if we don't do it, then someone in another 100 years will do it. So like that, to me, in a sci-fi world, makes the most sense.
I mean, I would argue that goes along too with a lot of like biblical stuff. If we're talking about the Watchers, talking about fallen angels, stuff like that, trying to influence humanity. Again, I think a lot of that stuff, when it comes down to it, it's entities that have essentially, it's like biological AI, essentially. It's like they just understand it all. So that's kind of what throws me off, is this idea that like when you look at these ancient stuff all throughout the world,
Yeah.
and all throughout time, there is a solid period where every culture has some type of non-human looking human. Like, hey, ours has the head of a fucking dog.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, what about you guys? You're like, oh, our God has the head of an elephant with a human body. It's like, there's so many weird things. When you look into, I'm blanking on his name. The guy who worked with the UFOs and stuff. Big on Joe Rogan.
Lazar?
Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
Bob Lazar, that was one of the ways he described this alien craft that he worked on, was he said he walked inside and everything was kind of one piece. He goes, everything like was fluid, almost like it all worked into itself. It's all lines. So it's like the walls warp down into the floor, into the chair, into the controls and all this stuff, and it's all like symbiotic kind of.
Yeah.
Like it's a type of technology we can't comprehend, and how it's even constructed, let alone how to use it.
Yeah.
So if you have that kind of stuff, when it comes to, obviously, if you had if you're an extra dimensional thing, if you're an alien, you're more likely to be extra dimensional than terrestrial, which means if you're within dimensions, and a dimension outside of ours is going to be a dimension of that's outside of time. A fourth dimension is outside of time. So that means whether it's us or not, it is something in this theory that has access to different times and would be able to use technology that the stuff Bob Lazar talked about, and he seems like a credible guy with his experiences, his witnesses, all that stuff. If what he says is true, then it's what he's talking about is beyond pyramids. Yeah. It's beyond this structure. It's an entirely new type of technology that we don't understand. So if you have that, creating something that looks like doing something man-made would be like this. It's like, hey, I need to carve out this whole quarry. I don't know, like, it's going to take me this many people, this many man hours, this many, but, oh, it's done? How did that happen? We're aliens. But, boop, it's done.
Yeah.
It's the technology is so much far advanced that 20, 30 years to build a pyramid that may even have all this other stuff underneath it and be an entire working unit in 20, 30 years is plausible. If you're looking at, obviously, it's unplausible stuff. But if you're looking at the idea of something that can go outside of time, then the technology brought would be able to do that.
Right. You're already assuming a jump there.
Anyway. But again, that would be the same technology you took back, because you wouldn't bring something without thinking about, if we're talking about time stuff.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about just, I mean, but that's to me, that's the hardest thing to argue. It's like, how is it not something outside of time?
I mean, you couldn't give them like your time travel technology, but you could give them knowledge of the stars, knowledge of geometry.
But I mean, everything like, I mean, not giving them the technology, obviously they take it back. But if you come here and you use your technology to do this, my whole thing is, how could you get so many people to build a structure for one person because they said, this is what I want. It's going to be for the pharaohs. You guys are going to defy reality and build it in this time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that still doesn't answer why there's pyramids all over the world.
Yeah.
And like, these are the freestanding structures. These are what last. These are the things that create the most interest. They all seem to be on the equator. Like, all this weird stuff where you're like, there's a pattern to these things. They all seem to be somewhat linked with the stars and stuff. And that's what, to me, really raises the questions. What is a pyramid? What's the point? Why is it popping up everywhere? And if it is part of something harnessing the Earth's energy, it would make sense that it would be on the equator, or it would be within some kind of planetary solar, star network.
Yeah.
And if it is everything they say, it would make sense that it would be the year of the Leo. And it was built during a time where maybe there was a different type of activation. All the hippies loved to be like, oh, the stars are this way and the planets are this way, so energy's this way.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what if that time energy and everything was just different because it was coming from a different star network or whatever?
Yeah.
And maybe it was a giant lion that represented all this power they were building. And then the Egyptians found it like, a fucking lion? We killed most of those. We got rid of those scary ones. Make it a face of ours because we're the king.
Yeah.
And that's a human thing to do.
Right.
Is knock the face of the lion off and build your fucking leader, and then be like, we should bury him in the fucking pyramid, and we'll just fucking wear gold and be fucking like, we're the best. And it's like, these are the guys who all agreed that this pyramid needed to be built, and that all of them were equally motivated and got it done. Like, that's crazy. We can't even get that to work at like any job anywhere as a business model. Even the best ones, people are like, well, we're not like going to work symbiotically perfectly. We're human.
Yeah.
Back then they were like, you're whipping up us with whips, so we're going to work perfectly for 20, 30 years and create the perfect structure with, it's going to be meticulous. You're going to like it. You're not getting paid. That's fine. We're all motivated to get this done the right way. Like, that's my life. I'd rather die. It's crazy you could get that many people to achieve that goal within the time frame of 20 and 30 years.
Well,
I don't know.
Just
seems pretty fucking stupid.
We are coming up on towards the end of the show here. I guess time will tell. This new study is going to be scrutinized, I'm sure, and try to be disproven. I don't see why they just don't directionally drill under there and from an angle, not disturbing the archaeological side, just go diagonally to where these columns are supposed to be, hundreds of meters.
But what you're asking is like normal logical questions that could get very easy answers and debunk or not.
Yeah.
We can't do that. But again, like, that's my big thing. We have Hitler. Everybody knows Hitler. Why was this guy so obsessed with like just genociding the world, but also equally invested with like these like ancient archaeological sites?
Yeah. Like the Spear of Destiny. killed
Yeah,
Jesus.
he went through all of these things, all these spiritual sites all throughout time.
Yeah.
And then had an army of Nazi scientists who suddenly had technology that we didn't have, and they obviously had an edge on their research. And the question is, where did they get the edge? We have plenty of scientists. Everybody's motivated by science, and if you understand science, you don't need something to motivate you. Life itself motivates you.
Yeah.
So what made them just better than everybody? It just makes you wonder. Like, what kind of, like...
The Ark of the Covenant.
But to me, it's always been a weird thing. You know,
Yeah.
I know we're ending it out. I'll end my thing with all throughout history, even our own, it's been very obvious that everyone's been obsessed with these sites. And we all have this gut feeling that these aren't just normal sites. They look the way they do, not to make an impact for the future, but to give a message. And I think deep down we all know there's an unfinished message we're waiting to hear. And I think this new discovery, either it's going to be legitimately debunked as fake, or we're about to start hearing some major changes to how we view most of these sites. You know, if this is true for this one, you know, it just goes on. I know it's a goofy thing to quote, but it's the Skinwalker Ranch thing. Or no, it was in the realm. I forgot the video, the one, but it was one of the ancient aliens things, and they were talking about a certain mountain in a certain place that is hollowed out on the inside, and multiple people have witnessed it, and it's a whole thing that there's a black pyramid inside of this mountain that is bigger than the Pyramid of Giza. And I forgot how big they said it was, but significantly bigger than the Pyramid of Giza. I think it was like 1,500 versus, like, what is the Pyramid of Giza, like 600?
What, feet or
Yeah.
meters?
I'll have to look it up. I can't quite remember, but basically I remember the time I looked it up, and I was like, whoa, it's something like 3 times bigger than the Pyramid of Giza, and it's inside of a mountain. But it's like highly restricted by like government and all this stuff, and you can't touch it. But it's like, it makes you wonder, like, what the fuck is a pyramid? There's nothing in nature that does this, so why are they just building pyramids all over the world if we've never had anything to inspire us on the idea?
Crystals.
Yeah, people found a crystal and they were like, we should spend our life building something that reminds us of it. It's pointy. Let's fucking build a giant fucking point and put somebody in it. It'll only take 30 years. We'll get it done. Like, why wouldn't you just be a human and enjoy your life? There's motivation behind what the fuck that shit is. And that's our show.
Thanks for watching. Join us next time. And a respective podcast out.
Bye.